Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. If you do like this programming, you like the interviews on my channel, please hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. A lot of times you may see musicians and artists here that you may not see anywhere else, and especially in a video format. So if you do like the channel, and you do like the programming, be sure and subscribe. Jack Grunsky is an Austro-Canadian singer, songwriter, composer, producer, and artist. As a musician, he has enjoyed careers in both popular music and children's music. In 1966, Jack formed the Austrian folk rock group Jack's Angels and released 4 albums and several singles, which made the charts. After the dissolution of the band, Mr. Grunsky would turn solo, releasing albums beginning in 1969 and through the early 70s. A move back to Canada in 1974, where Jack began a long and fruitful career as a composer of children's music. To date, there have been 16 children's albums, and Mr. Grunsky has been recognized for his work with a couple of Junos and several U.S. Parents' Choice Gold Awards, as well as other notable achievements. In 2006 and 2008 came a couple of instrumental Nujazz CDs. And let's not forget my guest's work in the visual arts. His paintings, in his own words, are a kind of visual poetry or music expressed in color, form, rhythm, and design. Well, welcome, Jack.
Thank you. So nice to be on your show. I'm delighted and honored.
Well, thank you for taking time out to visit with me and to share today. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where was it you were born?
Okay, wow. All right, back to the beginning. Well, you mentioned Austro-Canadian or Canadian-Austrian. I was born in Austria in 1945.
Okay.
And in the city of Graz.
Ah, all right.
Sort of, hour and a half south of Vienna.
Okay.
And I went kindergarten and all that there. And in 1951, when I was 6 years old, we emigrated to Canada. My dad's was a musician, a cellist, and his brother had already lived in Canada for, well, quite a number of years. And it was a time after the end of the Second World War, and Europe was in a turmoil. And my dad was looking for, I guess, a new horizons to find where he could become or practice his art as a musician, as a cellist. And my uncle convinced him, his brother, to perhaps consider Canada, Toronto. So in 1951, and I recall that journey quite vividly, we took the Queen Elizabeth II ocean liner across the Atlantic.
Yes, a famous.
In the city of Le Havre in France. That was where we departed. And 6 days on the ocean, and we landed in Quebec, where my aunt and her son picked us up by car and then traveled on the road through Montreal, and I think we stayed in Montreal, I can't remember that, but finally came back to Toronto. And so I grew up in Toronto when I was, since I was 6 years old.
Okay. Do you recall?
I'm not very articulate today.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm getting it, and I know the viewers will be too. So no worries. No worries about that.
I haven't spoken about my childhood for such a long time.
Oh, okay.
Kind of
Yeah, and you're having to brush off some of those those cobwebs up there in the attic. Right. Well, you mentioned your dad. You must have got the music gene from him.
Well,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I grew up in a musical household.
Okay.
Parents were musical. My dad was a professional musician. Um, during when I was very little still, during his lifetime in Europe, he had quite a career as conducting string quartets. He was
Oh,
a
okay.
soloist, of course. One of them was even called the Mozart Quartet.
Okay.
And so coming to Canada and establishing himself as a musician, he joined the Musicians Union. He applied to enter the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and became a cellist in the cello section. And he became a professor of music at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And then gradually, a few years later, he established himself as um, a specialist for Renaissance music, which was a passion of his. So in Toronto, at the University of Toronto, there are old Renaissance viols and viola da gambas.
Uh-huh.
My dad was also in possession of a viola da gamba, and he was very fond of this Renaissance music and formed a group and they performed. And of course, at home, that's where all the rehearsals took place. I had music growing up all the time. We had, a record collection, of course. My dad would be practicing his cello or with the rehearsals with his Renaissance group, and so on and so forth. And listening to a lot of music in our spare time. We never had a television, I might add. And music was definitely a very big form of entertainment and education at the same time, and a pastime for us at home. My brother and I both took lessons. My dad taught me how to play the cello for 6 years.
Oh, okay. Did
And
you enjoy that? Did you enjoy playing
I
the cello?
did, and I didn't. After 6 years, I didn't want to continue. It was physically a little, I don't know, I can't say, well, I was a young teenager at the time. I guess I started when I was 11, 12, 13 maybe, until about 16, 17 years of age. But I did it because it was what we did at home. We just played instruments. We also learned to play the recorder, which my parents also taught, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, my dad had visions of me following in his footsteps and
Right.
becoming a cellist. And yes, I enjoyed playing together in the family with um, other family members. My brothers played violin in summer camps, which were often music camps, not far from up north from Toronto. In Gravenhurst at Gull Lake, there was a beautiful camp and a music camp, and we attended that for about 3 or 4 summers, maybe more. And I also always joined groups. I was the cellist in a little string ensemble, and that part I really enjoyed. Yes, I enjoyed the performance element of it, and the sharing with the other students and kids, just making music together. But my heart was actually, I don't know when it started, but I guess listening to radio. I mentioned we didn't have a television, but listening to the radio a lot in the 50s, the late 50s, it was Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Connie Francis, Dean Martin, all that stuff. In those, you can get the idea. But all that stuff, I was really, really drawn, especially to the rockabilly sounds. Presley, obviously, and he became kind of a an idol for me.
Okay. All
And
right.
something about that early rock and roll music that probably spoke to me the strongest was the rhythmic
Okay.
aspect of it,
Right.
the bounce, the feel. And very soon I just had aspirations, or I imagined myself becoming a drummer.
Okay.
So rather than bowing the strings,
Right.
my passion was actually, part of my brain was over in a whole other musical genre, listening to, Harry Belafonte calypso music and
Oh, yes.
all those sort of uh, different, well, singers. Eddie Cochran, I can name a whole bunch, but that kind of musical style really spoke to me.
Okay.
And I guess, well, for example, in our backyard in West End of Toronto, when we lived there for a number of years, with some buddies of mine, friends from school and in our neighborhood, we put on little plays in the backyard. I also liked acting and performing.
Okay.
Performing was always in there already,
Okay.
without my being conscious that this was something that I would do later on for real.
Yeah.
But yeah, we put on little plays in our backyard for the neighbors, and we'd always end the plays with some musical presentation,
Okay.
singing songs, and so I sang, Elvis tunes, "Don't Be Cruel" and "Blues for Shoes" and all that stuff. Also, Buddy Holly. I was very much into Buddy
Oh,
Holly, the Crickets,
yes. Yes.
and started to collect a few records of my own with my allowance. I'd go to
I,
the local plaza and buy a single.
yeah. Speaking of that, can you remember one of your first 45s or albums that you got? That you,
That I purchased.
yeah.
Yeah, Buddy Holly and the Crickets was
Oh, okay.
definitely one of the first.
Okay. All
Maybe, baby. Hey,
right.
time of the day, of course. I was in high school. I joined a record club.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once ordering records via the mail,
Uh-huh.
and I remember Red Nichols, the
Okay.
Dixieland jazz. I really enjoyed that, and then sort of getting into a sort of jazzy kind of genre that had immense appeal for me. Anyway, so growing up with music all around, classical music, of course. My dad took me to the weekly uh, concerts and the rehearsals of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra every Sunday,
Oh,
where they had their so-called pops concerts. And so I'd be sitting up in Massey Hall, which is a big concert hall in Toronto, during the rehearsal, just sitting anywhere and watching the orchestra, usually focused on the percussion section.
yeah.
I was always drawn to that part of that element of music very strongly. Um, but and then uh, hearing the whole concert again with the audience. So that was an experience that was very powerful in my childhood. This
Right.
regular um, showering of sound, a
Yes.
beautiful sound, and a wide classical repertoire, excuse me, from the old romantics. You know, I favored very much the impressionists like Debussy,
Oh,
Ravel,
okay.
Saint-Saëns, and Peer Gynt. Well, I could name them on and on, of course. But I had a huge appreciation and love for that music. But then, as I mentioned previously, rock and roll and the radio waves, they sparked my passion. And as I came into my teen years in high school, also jazzy influences were there,
Yeah, yeah,
and sort of world music, I
right.
guess,
When
different
did you,
African rhythms. Later, I
right.
was very much
Oh,
influenced, and Brazilian music.
when were you bitten by the folk bug?
Okay, that was right when it happened in, I guess, the early 60s, 62 or 63. And the trigger was the Kingston Trio.
Oh, right,
With
right.
Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley.
Oh, yes.
Um, that suddenly, that acoustic sound and the three-part harmony,
Huh?
that kind of trumped my passion for rock and roll temporarily. And I was just absolutely spellbound, for lack of a better word, by that sound, that tight vocal harmony sound, and the acoustic guitars, and that drive and the live feel of it.
Right.
Um,
I remember my dad, I just wanted to mention one. He had a few of the Limelighters out,
oh,
another band. So I grew up with listening to that on the
beautiful.
hi-fi stereo
Oh
when
yeah.
when I was young. Yes, I remember that.
Okay. Well, listen, speaking of the hi-fi stereo,
Mhm.
I had a summer job once with my aunt, also originally from Europe, but she moved to the States, in fact, to Rochester, just on the other side of Lake Ontario here, opposite Toronto. And they had a nursery. Her family, they started a big nursery with trees, shrubs, and flowers, and all that. Anyway, I was invited to have a little summer job with her, pulling vines off trees and weeding gardens and this and that. And she had two sons who were already in university and no longer living there.
Okay.
And they had an immense record collection.
Yeah.
And in my spare time, and my aunt, she just totally encouraged this, find a record, play some music, listen to music. So I pulled out, just browsed through the records, all LPs, of course, and discovered they had the Kingston Trio,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Wow.
first one.
Wow.
And so here I was putting the needle on the album. Dun 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 Santiano, first
Yeah.
one on that album, I think it was. It just blew me away. I
Right.
could not get enough of it.
Yeah.
I put my ear really close to the speaker to kind of analyze and figure out what were they doing with the guitars, this flamenco kind of strumming, and then the harmony.
The
It
harmonies.
was magical.
Right.
It was a turning point in my youth, and I knew from that point on, I needed to have a guitar. I love drums and rhythm. In
Yeah.
fact, I already had a partial drum set at home because it was something my parents encouraged. I just wouldn't stop talking about wanting to have drums. And so one Christmas, I was gifted a snare drum with a hi-hat,
Oh, okay.
not the whole kit, which I really wanted.
And they didn't mind you practicing in the house. It wasn't too loud. Yeah.
I was in heaven then too.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
the snare drum took a back seat once I had I was just so excited about the idea and wanting to have, to play this kind of music. Well, I guess I should backtrack now and mention that because this is important for the next step of my journey. And you mentioned the folk music. My parents divorced before my dad and I came to Canada, and my stepmother, his wife, after the initial divorce from my mother, she and her son, my half brother, Michael, came a year later after my dad had established himself in Toronto, and we had a little apartment and this and that. But it was my father and my dad and my mother, still living in Austria, also remarried, by the way. They had a very harmonious agreement. I'm not going to bore listeners with, and I don't even know the whole story.
Okay.
But what the result of this split in our family was, it was mutually agreed by my parents that after schooling, I would return to Austria. And after high school, at first I visited during the summer and met my mother again. And of course, it was wonderful. And we had.
Let me ask you about that too. Was that something you were, after living in Canada for a period of time, were you a little apprehensive about going back to Austria, or how did you feel about?
Not really. No, I was quite excited because I've already been prepared intellectually and emotionally. And by the way, I have always been in touch with my mother, communicating through letters.
Okay.
Not telephone, but not in those days. But we had a regular correspondence, and there was already, excuse me, kind of a mutual connection there for sure.
Right.
I've always had this connection to my mother, but anyway, it was all good, and I was looking forward to after high school. I didn't know what to expect, and I was kind of excited. And I remember my parents my dad and my stepmom seeing me off at the airport, and traveled straight to Vienna. Yeah, it was Vienna, Toronto, Vienna. And there was my mom and her husband, and they picked me up, and it was a nice reunion and everything. And I stayed with her for a while, and she then, for the summer, I guess must have been a 2-month period. It was the whole summer. She and her husband took me on travels throughout Austria and then across the border down to Italy.
Oh, that would be
showing me,
yeah,
exposing me to European architecture, culture, music, art.
Yes.
Was like an educational learning experience.
Right.
All the way down to Naples, to Pompeii, Rome, Paestum, all these wonderful places with old Roman sites and temples, and Greek temples as well.
So much history, so much history. Yeah.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And my mother was she was a tutor, as well as her husband, very, very educated and well-read and knowledgeable. They were like professors, basically. So they both took it upon themselves to open my eyes. And it was it was just going, like, for me, it was like entering a whole new world. At that
Right.
time, it was just so new to me. Of course, I had been educated through high school with history and everything to do with world history and Europe in particular. And we had a lot of books, art books, and books on architecture at home. So I was already prepared. But here it was in real life.
Right. You're just
And
absorbing, taking all that in.
and it
Well,
was it was such a gift.
yeah. Well,
And
how long after you had moved back there, did you start thinking about putting a band together? Talk about that,
I will.
how,
Okay,
how
so
that's,
this was just the summer,
uh-huh.
and then I returned to finish high school. I had one more year to go, and then it was agreed I would return and then stay or
Okay.
study, begin some studies after college studies in Austria. And that's when I entered art college, first in the city of Linz, where my mother lived. And then the year later, I was, it was recommended I enter the Academy of Arts in Vienna. I was allowed to skip the second year of this art college,
Oh, is that right?
that
Okay.
first level program. I don't know how to describe it, but anyway, so it was then that again, I was blessed. My mother set me up in a little apartment, one room apartment in some um, place where I could just explore my own, do my homework and just listen to my music. And I should mention, one of the first things she gifted me with was a trip to the music store
Ah.
to purchase a acoustic guitar. So this, of course, I've been telling you and sharing, my excitement about folk music, Kingston Trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary at that time as well, and Bob Dylan, and later Joan Baez, and so on and so forth. Who, by the way, I met and got to know. But anyway, so that was the beginning. With I was still at art college, but I always took my guitar along for the lunch breaks and found the chords, the fingering, the picking styles that I've all picked up just listening to records and the radio and so on, and just figured it out myself. Later on, looked through books and had people show me things, of course, but initially I'm self-taught as a guitar player. And on these travels, again, through the summer, even the second time I returned to Austria, we went on travels to Spain
Oh, all right.
and landed, not, I mean, one of the stops was Granada, where we encountered flamenco music and
Oh,
the
yes.
performances, the Romani people there
Right.
around that amazingly beautiful city. And again, I was on fire just watching the guitar players and this,
Right.
all that. And it was just, it was unbelievable. It was, I consider myself so extremely fortunate to have had that opportunity and
To
all
be
the
exposed. Yeah.
influences showered upon me.
Right.
Later on, I understood and realized this was the nourishment out of, that provided future music for children in particular.
Right.
But backtracking to your question, I do get off on a tangent sometimes.
That's fine. That's
Anyway, it was during my art college days um, that I teamed up with my guitar with other like-minded students. One guy played the bass in a skiffle band, and we connected and we played together. He was keen on what I was playing, and I was singing Kingston Trio songs and Peter, Paul, and Mary songs. Had a few of my own little tunes already written. And then there was another guy He was actually a neighbor, very close in the neighborhood, who was also very keen on what I was doing. He had a guitar, so we got together, and then the three of us started to jam. And I, they were very keen on learning these songs. And it's interesting to mention at that time, and it was 1965, in Austria or maybe Central Europe, the North American folk music scene that had already really established or blossomed had not yet caught the imagination, or was Europe was not yet exposed to it as much as here. So I was in a very fortunate position to be able to share all these songs that I've been learning day in, day out,
Right.
with my friends. And we just played together. And sooner or later, we built up a repertoire. We started to sound very musically very tight and, in the pocket. And we imitated the Kingston Trio and played for friends, played in the art college and on the streets or in parks, which in Europe was very easy at the time. It was very, street musicians everywhere. And finally, because I had then really become a huge fan of Peter, Paul, and Mary. Puff the Magic Dragon, yes, but it was the Blowing in the Wind and the Bob Dylan covers that they did, When the Ship Comes In, and so on. Anyway, I was gifted those first albums of Peter, Paul, and Mary, and this same experience of exploring and analyzing the sounds they were creating and how they melded together musically. This was my education, musical education at the time, and I tried to emulate it. And with the help of my friends, we kind of got it to a certain level that found its appeal with our friends. But we needed a female singer. Now, this was during the time, the following year, when I had moved to Vienna in a little basement flat and studied at the academy. And in our spare time, and these two friends of mine who played the bass and the guitar, they also coincidentally started their studies at university in Vienna. And we always got together and just played. And then we figured, well, we needed a female singer, a female voice in there to emulate Mary from Peter, Paul, and Mary. And sure enough, we opened auditions.
I was going to ask you auditions. Yeah.
We actually auditioned some friends of ours in our social circles who showed some interest and actually came, and we taught them parts and this and that. They were all very, very sweet, very nice. But I guess I had a real particular sound in my head, and so far it wasn't the sound I was imagining. So we gently thanked everybody, and but then traveling back and forth to Linz in Vienna, back and forth with a train, which by the way is about an hour and a half. It was kind of a common thing because part of our families were in Linz and studied in Vienna. So back in Linz on a weekend, I guess, we were at the guitarist, his name is Herbert, his place, and often hung out there and jammed. And there was always a social group around, students. And there was a young woman, a girl, her name was Claudia. And she had a great voice. She just sang along. She was quite into Beatles and already had knowledge or knew a lot of pop songs and mostly from Great Britain. So she joined in, and immediately I recognized there's the sound.
There's that. There it
It was the
is.
sound. Her name is Claudia. So we had Christoph on bass, Herbert, Butt for short, Claudia, and myself. And we just dove right in, practicing and learning the songs. I arranged all the vocal harmonies because I had the model in my head already from Peter, Paul, Mary, Kingston Trio, and all this.
Yeah.
And they were willing participants to learn their parts. And we managed to put it together, and it sounded great. And there was excitement. We were very passionate. All four of us were really passionate about the results. And before we knew it, kids were following us around.
I was going to ask you. Yeah.
We landed a concert somewhere. I forget. Well, I forget how it happened, but we were offered a concert in one of this a 400-seater concert hall in Linz, and it was sold out.
Oh, wow.
Word had got around.
Uh-huh.
And I think we did that once or twice within a year or a few months. And a friend of the bass players who was studying law, he also was taken by our music and became a strong fan. His name is Gerhard Wildmoser. And he wrote a letter to a record label in Vienna telling or explaining, there's this group here, you've got to listen to it. Turned out that the record label, which was Amadeo, was a subsidiary of, or a branch of Polydor.
Okay.
And they distributed recordings from Vanguard Music, which had Joan Baez.
Right. A lot of the folk music.
So
yeah.
they were the distributor of Joan Baez records in Austria.
Okay.
And they kind of began to discover this folk music as well. And they coined a term in Austria called the green wave, grüne Welle, green wave, sort of giving folk music from North America and Great Britain sort of a label. And they wanted to build the repertoire
okay.
in their recording roster. So they sent, for one of the concerts, they actually sent an A&R guy from the label to come and see us. His name was Walter Proxel, and he was totally blown away by us. He said, yep, you're going to come on to Vienna. We're going to do a trial recording session, 6 songs, and take it from there.
Wow.
We went to Vienna, into the studio, bada beam, bada boom, 6 songs, just the way we played it live. No overdubs or anything.
No overdubs. Like okay. Okay.
We didn't even know what that was in those days. And 2 days later, we get a letter in the mail. They want to sign us for I think it was a 2-year contract. I can't remember, but for a term, a contract for a number of years and 4 albums.
Okay.
And singles, of course. We were in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah. Straight out of art school or university studying, just starting studies, and suddenly catapulted into a record label,
right.
For a record label.
Right.
And I guess the record, the people recognized the appeal was so strong that there was a following and an audience.
Yeah, that must have been a really, really proud, I mean, for you to think that you helped influence, that country and that part of the world to folk music, because like you said, it hadn't been, exposed over there, and that you helped bring it, and,
Well,
to Austria. Yeah. So
that became the story in the media and so on and so forth. Yes, later on, and much later, I appreciated the fact that I was at the right place at the right time.
At the right time.
Click.
Right.
At the time, I was just
There you go.
I I remember distinctly feeling, no, we're not ready for a recording yet. We're not as polished as I want us to be yet. We're just
Yeah.
not there yet. We didn't go through the grind of playing and playing in bars or in concerts or just building technique, developing technique or polish. We were just, it just, it worked. And it was pretty good, and I understand now, looking back, why
Yeah.
people were so excited about it. Anyway,
Right. Well,
long story
they
short,
hold
we
they
met.
hold up they hold up well, those
Yeah,
recordings, and your singles with the band did quite well in the charts.
they did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the record label obviously did a lot of promotion and marketing and pushing, and I have to add the radio station. There was no commercial stations in Austria at that time. It was the national, like the I don't well, in Canada we have the CBC. It was a national radio station called the ORF, and they uh, uh, took a really strong liking to our recordings. We did the first album called "Believe in a World," and there was one disc jockey, a woman, Eva Maria Kaiser, who really took a liking to our sound and promoted the heck out of it. The ORF,
Yeah.
the radio network, really helped
Really got behind you. Yeah.
popularize and spread this around. And consequently, within a very, very short period of time, we had a huge following, and did concert, not tour. Well, we did tours, small tours, but every hall that we played, it was filled. It was sold out. And but after the second album, um, Germany became a very strong territory for us, and then as well as Switzerland, and then by extension, Holland.
All right.
And we were invited up to travel by train to Holland, and did a whole television thing there. In Switzerland, we did a television show initially. We were scared out of our mind.
Were you?
Television, what is this?
Was it when you played on television, was it live or did you lip sync?
Always live.
It was live.
Always live. Yes.
Okay.
Never sing. Never lip sync. No. Not in those days. And it took off like wildfire. It was amazing. I don't think we even understood how this even happened or why it happened. It just did, and we loved it.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then
Well, I wanted to mention one of the singles, probably my favorite single for the A and the B side, both is this Life I'm Living, the A side, and then the B side, 10,000 Candles.
Yeah.
Which is a Carolyn Hester cover.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Now,
And
did you
both of
see?
those songs, yeah.
You saw my interview with Carolyn.
I didn't, and I'm going.
Okay.
My God.
Okay. Let me tell you, I don't remember
It
the
was
exact
another
name.
one of those. Yeah, she was another one of those
From the Greenwich
had
Village scene.
her album. I loved her songs and the way
Right.
she interpreted songs, and we recorded a few of hers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was from October. When you scroll through October of last year is when I talked.
Oh, I can't wait.
Go back and check that out. Yeah.
Can't
She's
wait.
still sharp as a tack. She's still,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And last I heard, she was still singing with her daughters, performing on stage. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing.
Anyway, that was my favorite. But
Yeah,
also,
it was a great single. Yeah.
yeah. But as far as like the album tracks, I like Hangman. That's one of my favorites you guys did, Hangman. And then nice cover of Dylan's Farewell Angelina.
Beautiful. Yes, we
Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
Yes. And then you also had an affinity for Tom Paxton, I see.
Very much so.
Ramblin' Boy and Can't Help But Wonder Where I'm Bound. Both of those
Yeah, the
you,
last
you
thing
did
on my mind. Oh, beautiful.
you did great
Oh,
covers.
as we played together, I was always listening to records and acquiring new records. Often I'd visit back to Canada in the holidays, visit my dad and stepmom and my brother, and I'd look through, I'd gather up and purchase records, find records, or check out the folk scene in Toronto. At that time, it was in Yorkville. I'd go to the coffee houses and listen to these artists. Carolyn Hester played there. I don't think I saw her though. But anyway, a lot of amazing people who I've always accumulated new material, new songwriters, listening to new songwriters and folk singers. I knew all of Dylan. I followed Dylan, Joan Baez, Ian and Sylvia, Gordon Lightfoot.
Oh, Gordon, I like his a
All,
lot
all,
of his early material. I really enjoy. A lot of people haven't heard that, but it's really
yeah.
really good. Kathy Young, you know who Kathy Young, right? Kathy Young.
Yes, the name, but I'm trying to remember. My memory's a little
When
fuzzy.
you said Yorkville, she played in around that area, and
Yeah.
folky. I talked to her too, and it was before. I think it was around the same time as Carolyn, maybe a little bit before. But yeah, back to Jack's
Oh,
Angels. You guys,
yeah. So yeah, and then just another singers, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee.
right,
There was a very
yeah,
vibrant folk scene in Toronto, just as
right,
there was in New York in Greenwich Village. Same
right.
sort of thing. And I got to know some of those people, and of course, so uh, gathering up material and beginning to write songs myself for
Yes.
my group. Yeah, we developed quite an exciting repertoire, and people loved it. And but sooner or later, when we were becoming quite successful in terms of popularity and concert venues offered to us in Vienna, the Vienna Concert Hall, excuse me, was probably that performance was the highlight of our career. And I'll just briefly mention how it got to that.
Sure.
In 1968, Joan Baez came to Vienna to perform a concert at the Vienna Concert Hall. She was, of course, her records were distributed by Amadeo. So
Yeah.
she was a label mate. I already worshipped her as the goddess of folk music, listening to all the records, learning all of those songs, and through her, learning a lot of the Dylan tunes too, by the way. So when she arrived in Vienna, the record label sent us for Jack's Angels to the airport to greet her.
Oh, okay.
And Herbert had a little car, and we drove out there. We waited. I handed her flowers. She came. She was just all smiles, Joan Baez, a heart as big as a beautiful, beautiful vision, if you will. Anyway, I don't remember if we immediately hugged, but obviously she was already aware of us. People have been telling her that, yeah, there's this group in Vienna, and they actually proposed, the label proposed, wanted to ask her if we could open for her, which her management declined. However, I guess she must have been aware of all this of us. And after giving her flowers, it was like we were kids, just like we already knew each other for years. It was so familiar and so sweet. We asked her if she wanted to come with us in the car rather than take a limo to her,
Yeah.
and she said yes. So she squeezed in this little car with her in the middle in the back seat between Claudia and Herbert. No,
Yeah.
Christoph. Herbert was driving. I was sitting in the passenger seat in the front, and we were just, here's Joan Baez in our little car.
In your car.
It
You
was
would
a
have
beautiful
yeah,
moment.
a few years before you would have never imagined that.
It
No,
was so
no.
funny. And anyway,
Yeah.
we were chummy and just giggles and laughs and stories. And she asked questions, how we're doing, what we do, and all this sort of thing. And invited us, or the concert agency invited us to backstage for her concert, which we attended, but backstage. And when it came time for her encore, she came back, she pulled all of us out, brought us up on stage, and sat us behind her. The concert hall was so full that they even had seating behind her on stage. I have photos of this. It looks really amazing. So anyway, we were sitting behind her, and she did some song, and we got up and did the clapping along. It was some kind of a gospel, I believe. I can't remember what. And audience loved it. She went off stage. She came back for a second encore. And then she came straight toward me, took me by the hand, and took me right up to the mic. Sound guy put a second mic right beside her without any warning or telling me, what's going on. I just, okay. And she introduces a song and starts to play "We Shall Overcome."
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What could I do? I just sang along and harmonized right on the spot. It was one of my highlights in my early years there,
Oh,
singing with Joan Baez. And it was really, really, I treasure this to this day.
right,
And
right.
every time I return to Austria, by the way, for concerts, which I sometimes do, I always tell this story.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, what a moment. Yeah, you
It was
know.
good. The
It's
next
probably
day,
it's probably better that she just spontaneously pulled you up there rather than told you in advance. You didn't have time to get nervous.
oh
You
yeah,
didn't.
it's perfect. It's just
Right.
the next day, a new magazine did a big spread, and she wanted to go riding south of Vienna, so we all joined. We were invited to tag along, and there was a big photo shoot of her riding horses with her um, uh, entourage, and us hanging around together with her and walking down the path and this and that. It was great. They did a big 4-page spread in a magazine of Joan Baez with Jack's Angels, and it was great. So that was that story. Anyway,
It's a
oh,
nice.
anyway, I was getting off topic. I wanted to tie in Joan Baez, but to get back to what I mentioned previously, because every the hype was strong, and a lot of excitement about folk music in Austria now that Baez and other people started to come to perform, and we were very, very popular and played often in the radio. The concert agency, the same concert agency, invited us 3 months later, I think it was September, to do a solo concert in the Vienna Concert Hall, and it
Oh,
was sold out.
yes.
This was, uh, I guess, the high point
The
of
peak.
Jack's Angels' career, and I say that because it was our last performance. In that, there were managers from, or people, representatives from London, England, a television program, as well as management people from, I think, Germany. Yeah, Germany, who already were managing some big pop stars, Udo Jürgens, for example. They offered us a deal. And this is where things broke apart. Unfortunately, I would have been ready, I guess. Um, the Christoph and Herbert, they had to back down because they were taking serious studies. I took a pause from my art studies, art college, because we were playing so much and touring. At that time, also, Claudia's attention started to drift into other directions, and she had musical ideas that she wanted to fulfill. And our format of the Peter, Paul, and Mary model wasn't enough to satisfy all of our uh, desires or ideas, you know. So we actually split amiably after that performance. The record label was very bitter about this, however,
Yeah. Yeah.
offered to agree to the group splitting up prior to the contract being fulfilled. Mind you, we had already recorded 4 albums and a slew of singles.
Yeah.
In those days, albums were turned out quite often, like every 6 months or so. But it was agreed that if I stayed with the record label, because this producer who discovered us or who came to see us initially, I guess he recognized that I was the creative force in the group who did the arranging, and I had already written some songs that had gotten quite a lot of airplay. So I had a song, you know, they wanted to keep me on the label, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Right.
And agreed to the group splitting up, and they would continue to promote me as a solo artist.
Solo artist.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
from there, and I wrote some songs
Yeah,
that were,
you kind of you were kind of a precursor in a way, a little bit earlier to the singer-songwriter movement, you know, with your solo material.
Austria, yes,
Yeah,
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 we
yeah,
did. And again, I've been listening. Then I've listening to music. James Taylor was already
yeah.
big at that time, and I know I listened a lot to him. And well, I was influenced by a lot of different styles still, not just the folk music.
Yeah.
Um, my heart was still with jazzy influences, the calypso, the rhythmic kind of
Yeah,
things, Harry Belafonte. So I began to write
yeah,
songs consciously or subconsciously borrowing from these different styles. Oh,
right.
I also listened to a lot of Burt Bacharach,
Yeah,
just by
yeah,
example, just stuff that was playing on their airwaves.
right,
I,
right,
I guess I was influenced in a way by all of it.
right.
Petunia Clark
Yeah.
and
Well,
all the British singers and what have
well, I had yeah, I've listened to some tracks off of some of that earlier 70s. The ship, my ship, 1969. And I just wanted to, if you would, test your memory here. Um, if you would, the songs that I have an affinity for, and maybe get your input, backstory, inspiration, that kind of thing, if you can remember.
yeah,
Uh,
that
okay,
time period is still quite vivid in my memory.
okay. That the album My Ship from '69. One of the first tracks that I really like is In This Room. In This Room.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
I really like the lyrics in that one too, especially.
Well, that lyric stems from a very real place, and you're segueing into the next section of my a very, very major, the major part of my personal life, and that is the acquaintance and getting to know my wife, Helta,
Yeah.
who is a cousin of Claudia.
Ah, okay, okay.
I should mention that Claudia passed away a few years ago in 2000, I think 2021. So she's no longer with us. But anyway, Herta is Claudia's cousin. and she lived in Linz, and she came to all of our concerts in Linz and in Vienna. And I became very friendly with Hertha. I fell in love with her, quite frankly, and I wrote a whole bunch of songs about her, for her. One of a couple of which got a lot of radio play. The first one, still during the time of Jack's Angels, was called "The Prince in Love Is Me."
Okay.
The
Yeah.
first commercial hit, if I may say so, of the Jack's Angels time.
Yeah.
And then the My Shift came along, and you mentioned In This Room. When I traveled on the weekends by train back to Linz, I visited Hertha, and she had the most charming, well, her family was ever so sweet. Um, they welcomed me and made me feel really very much at home. And she had a space in their household, in their apartment, that was just magical. A lot of little trinkets, little picture frames, and uh, antiques, and all sorts of knickknacks. Anyway, the atmosphere, along with her presence, nourished or inspired the lyrics and the mood of that song. Because it was, I guess it was evening, and looking out on it was it was in downtown Linz, so it was the old apartment buildings, and she had lacy window curtains, and just looking out in the balcony into the night sky and what have you. It was very magical, yeah. So that's where that song originated.
That's nice to hear that. I like to hear the origins of songs.
And while I'm on the topic,
Mhm.
the other song about her in this on this album is called Julie Knows.
Okay.
I mentioned her name is Hertha, but uh, being the hopeless romantic that I still am, but definitely was in those years, we used to give ourselves nicknames. And it's, as my memory serves me well, in Austria, it was a kind of a common thing to do, even for parents to give their kids nicknames. And because Hertha lived in this apartment on the second or third floor of this old European building, it very much, she had a balcony which looked just like the balcony of Julia in, what is it, Padua in Italy. I
Oh,
had seen on my travels with my mother.
yeah.
We visited Italy. Anyway, to me, she was Juliet up on the balcony. And I just started for fun calling her Julie,
Uh-huh.
and it stuck.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I was always calling her Julie, and friends called her Julie, and we introduced her as Julie. And then I wrote a song called Julie Knows.
Yeah, yeah. Dri Driving that point home, right? Yeah, exactly.
Which, by the way, was strongly influenced by the bossa nova. I
Okay.
love
Yeah,
bossa nova
I
and the
do too.
Brazilian, and that song was just the musicians playing the guitars
Yeah,
and the flutes. It was
yeah.
very much the Carlos Jobim vibe.
All that, yes.
Uh,
And sad to hear of Sergio Mendes passing
Jorge
recently.
Mendes, yes, we saw those live in Vienna.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But another track up that I really like is Train Station Blues.
That was my big hit
Yes, yes.
in those times. And then after that, I had another one, which was even bigger. But after that, it was just smaller hits.
Yeah. But my favorite on the whole album though is South End of the Town. That's my favorite.
Wow.
That's my favorite. Yeah. I like the strings. I like,
Yes.
yeah, in that. Yes,
You
yes.
know, I had the good fortune living in Vienna. I got to know so many musicians and music industry people, artists of all genres. And so this person, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but yeah, the arranger for that track was amazing. And I was in 1968, I was actually invited to represent Austria in a song contest which took place, not the Eurovision Song Contests, which had already started up years leading to that time, but the countries in the Eastern Bloc, east of the Iron Curtain in those years,
Yes, yes.
Czechoslovakia, and so on. Anyway, they wanted to create a sort of relationship, a positive cultural relationship by exchanging artists and inviting artists to go over the border and perform and play in other venues on the in the Eastern European countries. So Austria sent me to this particular festival. It was called the Intervision contest, song contest.
Okay.
And I represented Austria, and it was that song, The South End of the Town, that I performed with an orchestra in the city of Karlovy Vary in Czechoslovakia. And yeah, it was great. But that arranger, I guess it was the same arranger who did it on the album.
Yeah.
But
I think that could have been a hit. I think that song could have been a single. I really do. I like that.
I can't remember if it came out as a single or not, but I know it was played a lot on the radio. In fact, I was blessed with a lot of airplay. Again, it was the right place at the right time, and what I was doing was kind of new.
Yeah.
But it had its time limit. There was a limit, and as the music industry and the cultural scene in Europe developed, gradually it became a little more on the fringes, if you will.
Right, right. Well, I know you've been told this before. This is not anything new, but your voice recalls Paul Simon. You sound
many times,
many times, yeah. But that's a good thing.
I recognize it myself because I'm a huge
that's a good but that's a good thing, you know. But the moving on to Toronto. Now, was that had you just moved back to Toronto at that time, or is that why the album was called Toronto?
No, the album Toronto was recorded in London, England. Okay. And again, it came about through the acquaintance I had with some of these, well, they became celebrities eventually, but actors, radio people, producers, musicians, a gentleman by the name of Andre Heller, who now is quite a famous personality in Austria and beyond. Anyway, at that time, we were friends. We hung out together. He introduced the record label to Alexis Corner.
Oh, okay.
A blues guy from London who hung out with the Rolling Stones, with the Small Faces, with the John Mayall, the whole blues scene, Eric Clapton. Anyway, he was a figurehead in the city of London at that time. And he produced other artists. And Andre Heller suggested, why not send Jack to London and have Alexis Corner produce an album of his to help further my career and for the benefit of, you know, the label and just the advancement of things that were happening at that time. So Alexis Corner came to Vienna. They had a meeting, and we were introduced. He says, "Yeah, I'm going to produce you." And the next thing, flew to London, stayed there a week. Alexis put me up in some musician's flat that was vacated at the time. And I might add, there was no heating.
Oh,
it was freezing cold.
I was going to say, I bet it was.
But I loved it because every day we'd spend uh, I guess it was 4 or 5 days in a row, just every day at the Delane LA studios in London, and corner producing. And I played my tracks, and there the whole process of overdubbing was initially kind of, that's when I became aware of it, I think. And there was a musician that was introduced, a flugelhorn player, Mike Rosen,
Yeah.
did overdubs. I think maybe sometime we did play live together or record live together, but this is a little vague. But then after the sessions with me were over and done, I did all my guitar and vocals and piano. I flew back to Vienna, and it was after I left that Alexis Corner invited Mick Taylor to do some slide blues guitar overdubs on about 4 or 5 tunes.
Yeah.
One of them was a blues tune called Moonchild Blues, which I wrote.
Yeah.
But Alexis Corner didn't like my guitar playing because it wasn't bluesy enough. So he trashed my guitar track. He played the rhythm guitar with his bluesy energy. And Mick Taylor did all that amazing, fancy slide guitar. And all that was left of me was the vocal.
The vocals on that one. Oh, wow. Well, it works. It does work, you know.
It worked.
I mean,
It worked.
yeah.
And again, a lot of radio play. I was blessed with that. Yeah.
I'll tell you my 4 favorite tracks on there and see what you have to say. Children in a Game. That's my first one. Sweeper Woman. Okay. I like that. Now that could have been a single. That has like hit.
It was a single.
Hit. Okay.
It was quite a big single, actually. But not that version. It was re-recorded with a band, a commercial band. I think on the record it was just me on the guitar. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was re-recorded with piano and quite punchy, and it became a hit in Austria.
Okay.
And it was all about, by the way, looking out. We lived in Vienna at that time, an apartment, and everywhere on the streets, the old, elderly ladies sweeping the sidewalks, and it was a common thing. So it captured my attention, and
right. Well, a lot of your songs too, you hit on unique subjects that you don't hear in a lot of other material, like that, Sweeper Woman. But then the Lion and the Tamer, I like that analogy. I like that. Yeah, the music as well as the lyrics in that one.
Well, I guess I was stretching my poetic muscles, starting to become influenced by Beatles.
Yeah.
Who else? Well, I guess the West Coast scene started to be happening. Oh yeah, with psychedelic lyrics, if you will.
Mind expansion.
My ways of writing lyrics and poetry, getting a little more abstract and not so much folky anymore. It was more psychedelic, I guess, in a way. Although, and I say this with all honesty, I have never taken any psychedelic in my life.
Yeah.
Once in a while, the odd, but never. That part of the whole music culture, that aspect of it, we never brushed up into that. We never were exposed to that. And I guess it's a blessing in a way.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. I think too many, it can warp the theme and the motifs of what they're trying to say too much if you go too much that direction. So I don't think it's like anything else, in moderation. But the one last track and you got a thing.
Yeah, the circles are hanging around in Austria. They're still very conservative and still rather untouched from that whole scene. In
Oh,
Germany, it was different.
right.
And after I changed labels
Yeah.
and entered the German music scene from a different, from the base of in Munich with a different record label, I was exposed to a lot of that scene, but
Yeah.
again, never took part in it.
Right. 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 Well, you had a strong enough will not to also,
It had
Well,
no appeal to me, frankly.
right. Well, one last track off of that album, And You Got a Thing to Say to Me is another one that I
Ain't
really
you got a thing to say to me?
Ain't You Got a Thing to Say. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful guitar part there with Mick Taylor. Beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then a couple of albums from 71, both from 71, Buffalo Brian and Newborn Man.
Yes,
Now,
those.
these are just the ones that I've listened to or tracks off of. So we're not going to go over every solo album, but just the ones that I've listened. From Buffalo Brian, The Gap. Now, The Gap, now speaking of Paul Simon, you're probably familiar with this song, The Only Living Boy in New York.
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
that reminds me of that track, The
Wow,
Gap.
wow.
Yeah,
This was already my time in Germany.
yeah,
I mean, I'm still living in Austria,
yeah,
but traveled to Munich all the time and then traveled all over Germany performing with German musicians and other, a variety of different musicians and studio musicians. Anyway, those albums, starting with Toronto, well, yeah, Toronto was recorded in London, but Buffalo Brian was the first album recorded with German musicians in Munich,
in Munich.
as
Okay,
well as Newborn Man, and then the following one, Jack Grunsky.
right, right, right. Okay, for Muskoka, for Muskoka, for
From
Muskoka.
Muskoka.
Yeah, I like that one.
During those years, I guess I was always very attached to my childhood growing up, summer camps, North Ontario landscape, the nature and wilderness, etc., the romanticism of it all, and it had a profound impact on me in my growing up years in Toronto. And while I lived in Europe, in Austria and Germany, I always had this, I'm not going to call it homesickness, which is silly, but this connection back to the open spaces of Canada that I was so familiar with, Ontario specifically. And I kind of missed that. And so that became a subject matter for a lot of my songs, a kind of yearning for
Yeah,
this time or this atmosphere or this feeling. And
yes,
for Muskoka is precisely that. That's what that song is about. Muskoka being a territory just north of Toronto, beautiful with lakes and cottages and this canoeing. I was always an avid canoer and just loved boating and swimming and the outdoors. So
right, right.
yeah, that song expressed this longing or this feeling, as a lot of songs. I even wrote a song called "Back Home to Canada."
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. See, you could tell you were longing for that. Yeah, I had those same feelings too and thoughts. Even now, I'll dream about that too. The log cabin, the which I never really been to, but just the pine trees and the lake and the log cabin. Smokey the Bear. You know what I mean? Prevent forest fires. That imagery. That kind of thing. The natural parks.
Once
Things
you
like
experience that, you never forget it.
right, right,
It
right.
becomes part of you. You just
Yeah, yeah, you
pine
know,
trees. Oh,
yeah, yeah, you know. But anyway, moving on to then one last from Buffalo Brian. What a long time it was has been. Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
yeah. That's my
Starting to
other
play
trick.
around juxtaposing
Yes, yes,
uh, ideas. Again, I guess a song of yearning of some sort. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yes. In fact, now that you mention it, I hadn't listened to that song for ages. But now that you bring it up, I think it was inspired after a short visit back home to Toronto and connecting with some friends of mine again. I
Yeah.
think that's where that song came out of.
Okay. It's okay. Moving on to Newborn Man from the
Okay.
same year, 71. I think my favorite on the album is Lilyfield. I think that's,
Oh, wow.
yeah. Yeah. I just like the whole feel of that song.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah.
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 And I like the cover too, I want to say, of the album. I like
Yeah.
the
Lieberman. That was, yeah. I didn't paint that, but
yeah,
it was painted, obviously. And some artist in Munich hired by the record label.
yeah, did that. Did
But
that.
that was that whole album, Newborn Man, strongly influenced by Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Yeah, I can hear that. Yes, I can.
I was always a huge
Yeah,
Stills fan
yeah,
and also Crosby,
yeah.
Nash too, but more those two guys.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
I mean Stills and Crosby. Sorry.
right.
And I listened to a lot of them as a group and also their solo albums. And I remember David Crosby had a solo album. I don't remember the name, but his style, this open-ended, long, melodic, atmospheric sounds and poetry, that inspired many of those songs.
Right, right. Exactly. I want, you mentioned earlier the Birds. I want to ask you, are you a fan of Gene Clark's solo material? Did he perform as separate from the Birds? I mean, it was after the Birds, but a lot of his, it's really good. You used to seek that out, search that out, just look on YouTube or whatever. But he had some really good Gene Clark. Of course,
Yes,
yeah, he had some really good stuff.
it definitely rings a bell, although right now I'm not connecting the dots. But
Yeah.
I would just quickly add,
Mhm.
backtracking to my the early years when I was still, well, after the Angels, there was there. I mentioned the Austrian radio network and this growing interest in folk music or singer-songwriter style music. They offered me, the radio station, a half-hour radio show
Yeah.
where I could uh, play any songs and do anything I wanted with it. I picked songs out of my own personal record collection. Eventually, record labels started sending me records to,
Yes, they will.
and it was the whole folk music singer-songwriter scene that
Yeah.
I reintroduced or added to the interest towards this music, I guess. It was a weekly show, and then it was syndicated in Switzerland and South Germany as well. So I actually gained had a lot of listeners and a lot of positive feedback. And I recorded shows for about 2.5 years, I think it was, before
Wow.
finally returning to Canada. But
Yeah. See, that
so,
was my dream job. If I had been born maybe 10, 15 years earlier, a DJ or program director, and play what I wanted, like what you just said.
yes,
That
yeah.
that would have been my dream job,
Yeah.
you
You
know.
mentioned Gene Clark, so
Yeah.
that's what triggered that memory because
Yeah.
I played a lot of these singer-songwriters
Yeah.
and birds as well, by the way.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, that whole it was a beautiful opportunity for me and a real gift
Yes.
to have that chance to just share my discoveries and enthusiasm for all
In
this.
your taste, in your taste. Yeah. Yeah. Well, two more real quick from Newborn Man: The Jester and the King. Another one I like, and then The Seal Hunt. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That
Nice.
was a newspaper article on the slaughter of the seals in Canada. Pierre Trudeau was the prime minister at that time. And I mention that only because um, we sent him from Munich, sent him an album, that album,
That album.
as a gift, which he
Uh-huh.
actually he actually received, or at least the secretaries received.
You don't know they gave it to
response
him or
from
not.
his office.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was so taken and moved and touched, well, horrified by this article of the nature of that gruesome theme that I decided to write a song about it. As with most of the songs, it always stemmed from some sort of an emotional response to something that either I had experienced or heard about or read about. And like any songwriter, it became a topical song as it was, I guess, with that theme. So yeah.
Well, in the early 80s, it's interesting that you took a long foray into children's music. Recently, I mentioned this before the show, Peter Meesrock, a South African born, lives in
Yeah.
Montreal.
Yeah, yeah.
He did the music for a children's animated series in English, Charlie and Mimo. Do
Oh,
you,
yeah.
you know Charlie and Mimo? Okay, okay.
Yes.
He did the music for that. And then not long ago, Jim Valley, who was in Paul Revere and the Raiders at one time,
Yeah.
he started Rainbow Planet. Are you familiar with Rainbow Planet? Which is, it's like worldwide, educating
Yeah.
children through music, albums, books, dance, and plays. That's what that's all about. Rainbow Planet. So yeah, there's a couple of more, and I can't put my finger on it that moved into that. So that's interesting, going into that direction into children's music.
Yeah.
After an adult career, like
I
that.
lived in South Africa. I visited there. I was invited to, well, now during the time I had entered the children's music world,
Yeah, yeah.
I was invited to do a teachers conference, sort of not a lecture, but a presentation
Okay.
for a music conference in Cape Town.
Ah, all right.
And 3 weeks there, stayed at a friend's place, and it was an amazing experience.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, that trip had a strong influence on my writing.
Oh, did it. Another Canadian I just thought of, Fergus Hambleton.
I saw him at last a year ago, I think. He came
Uh,
to my art show.
okay, okay. He's
But
another one
yeah,
that I
he's
talked to.
an amazing musician, Toronto
Yeah,
musician.
yes,
We've been following each other on Facebook, and uh, I know I played at a school once where his daughter uh, was in the audience, I guess, and he sent a very complimentary email after that. So yeah, we've been sort of in touch off and on online. And I had an art show about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and he showed up. So it was good. Yeah.
oh, wow.
With his daughter.
Right, right, right. Well, it's good to connect with those people, like you said, like
What
that.
an amazing musician he is.
Yes, he really is. He really is. But as I mentioned in the intro, for your work with children's music,
Yeah.
you received a couple of Juno Awards, several U.S. Parents' Choice Gold Awards, and other achievements. So you've been well recognized uh, in that area. In the touring, playing live in theaters, children's festivals, and family concert venues as well. So you must really enjoy that.
I did enjoy it. Yes, I'm not doing much of that anymore, every now and again, but that was a good run. I think about 37, 38 years. It began, I think 83-ish, 84-ish, or even no earlier, actually, 82 maybe.
Yeah.
There was a transition period when we moved when my wife and our daughter, we moved from Austria back to Canada. For my wife, it was the first time. But I tried to get established here. Of course, nobody knew who I was. But the reason, just quickly to mention, the reason was for me to want to come back here is because the music scene in Europe was shifting, and the interest in my kind of music was fading.
Wayne. Yeah.
And so I felt there was a strong, the energy here in the States, in Canada, the scene that was happening, it really drew me, and I made connections and felt I wanted to take that leap of faith.
Yes. Yes.
Try to establish myself here.
Right. That's what I tell you guys when doing these interviews.
The
Thank
beginning
you.
was
Thank
hard.
you for taking the leap of faith. Right. Right.
Mind you, my records were available here at all the record stores because the Polydor distribution company had them available here too.
Yeah.
For that matter, our records were released in many territories: Japan, South Africa, Australia, in those days. So there was reason for me to believe, well, I'll just start here and hopefully make connections. I traveled around all the record labels and made connections to folk clubs, festivals, and et cetera, et cetera. Made friends with musicians and connected with an amazing producer, Chad Urshik, who then produced an album, my first album in Canada, The Patience of a Sailor. And it was tough, although I was doing a fair bit of work and getting around, making connections. No label signed me on, but as I say, with the help of Chad and other people who supported what I did, we managed to produce that and to release that. But at the same time, um, my daughter at that time, she was in grade 3. Her teacher heard of my music and stuff. We connected. We got to know her, of course, and she invited me to her classroom to play a couple of songs for the kids at lunchtime, or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I did. Anything. Long story short, one thing led to another. Over the period of a couple of months, I visited her school more frequently, and then the community on Toronto Island, where there is a very nice community of people there who travel back and forth across with a ferry every day. And they have a school there. And I was invited by parents from someone there, I forget, but to become a freelance music teacher at a Montessori school on the island. And this led to a whole bunch of connections to parents, to families, and this and that. And here I was starting to figure out, as I was teaching children how to play recorder, singing songs with them, putting on little shows with them. I was utilizing all my skills from, performing previously for the grown-up audiences, so to speak, and trying to translate that and utilize it for creating and adapting children's music. Raffi became a big name in the field of children's music at that time when I was teaching.
When you were,
So my focus started to drift and shift rather towards, well, creating music for children. Then along came Sharon and Bram, who I got to become friends with. Fred Penner did the same. I realized, he was doing school tours, and I got to know Fred Penner later on, and I produced one of his albums.
Yeah.
But one thing led to the next. I connected with a singer, Matt Maxwell, who sang children's songs in French. He was a French teacher, and he started to record at Chad Urshik's studio, who had produced me. So we connected, and he invited me to join him on doing some children's shows in schools. That's when my eyes were opened to this whole other marketplace, so to speak, or let's say audience.
Right.
Wow. And then I became aware of children's festivals, which were huge, had immense popularity, and all the, Red Penner and all people played in Charlotte Diamond and in the United States. So one thing led to the next. I finally wrote enough material, children's tunes, and adapted some traditionals, and found the means to produce my first children's record in a friend's home studio. And with the help of that recording, I approached Rafi's manager.
Okay.
At that time, no longer was Rafi's manager, I think. They had split ways. The Rafi went in other directions. So Glenn Cernick, who was the contact, I connected with him, and we decided to give it a try and work together. He established some very, very potent contacts for me, especially to the States. And it was a company in Los Angeles, Young Heart Music, who at that time, and they featured Greg and Steve, along with many other children's performers that were big at the time in the United States. Kathy Fink. Anyway, I'm trying to remember names. Anyway, Glenn did make that connection for me. I was signed to a label in Toronto at first, the Children's Group, and then by extension, that evolved into a connection with BMG Kids.
Oh.
BMG label that decided to open a section dedicated to children's music, and they called it BMG Kids. Children's music in the 80s, early 90s was huge.
Yeah.
And so I was signed to that label, grateful that they believed in what I did. And I was promoted and marketed, and the concert video was produced. I did a lot of tours, and what was very helpful was the connection to the early childhood educational conferences that took place all over, most of them in the United States.
Yeah.
And our trips Glenn and my trips there were facilitated often by the record label or the Young Heart Music in Los Angeles. And I developed teachers' workshops, music workshops for kids, just using my repertoire and my recordings. With a dear friend of mine, an educator here in Toronto, we created workbooks for the classroom, for elementary level classrooms, which had topics and explorations all having to do with my songs. I have one here.
Oh, good.
I'll just show you one here. This one's based on my record called The Dream Catcher. And I'll just open a page to give an example. This would be, I did it all by hand, by the way. The lyrics of the background history story, then activities to go with the song and lyrics, other references, cross-referencing to other sources of interest and study, and a lot of visual diagrams here depicting the Mbira, for example.
Yes, yes.
stuff like that. Anyway, and that, I think all in all, looking back, I've done about 53, 54 teachers conferences or workshops or keynotes. I did a few keynotes too.
Right, right. Well, you know, I know you know this because you worked in it for so long. The children are just like empty vessels, you know,
Yeah,
just waiting to be filled up with, and then you help fill, you know, their minds and their spirits and their imagination with this music and the workshops and the little tasks that they have to go by, you know, and go with, and
yeah.
it's you know, it helps to shape and form those lives at an early age. Yeah, yeah,
It was with the birth of our second daughter,
yeah,
Cosima,
yeah,
in 1979
yeah.
that we discovered, Heather and I, that she's loves to sing and perform just like, we always do at home,
Yeah,
made her own videos and this and that. So we encouraged this all the time. And by the time she was 9 years old, I had her on stage with me
yeah,
for a lot of my public concerts, public performances. Later on, she became a regular member of my band when we did large bust-in school shows, the type that Greg and Steve would promote, renting big halls and
yeah,
bringing busing in schools from different districts.
yeah,
But in our cases, it was all organized by a company called Festival Theater Arts, and they promoted these amazing venues and performances, and arranging all the busing. And we would do 3 shows a day in a huge venue that seated maybe 1,000 people, like these modern church facilities, for example.
yeah, yeah.
So had all the lighting and the sound already there in place. So it was very a good fit to organize family concerts or school concerts in these kind of venues. So for those events, I had a band,
Yeah, yeah.
player, bass player often, but Cosima for sure. And harmony singing, Cosima developed guitar. She played guitar, ukulele, percussion, xylophone, and the whole bit. And
Yeah.
now she's doing exactly the same thing that I,
Right, I know.
and
It's
I'm helping her out.
right. I'm gonna say she has a career of her own. Yeah, exactly.
She's doing a show in Oakville in a big theater in November, and I'm gonna come on stage as a guest for a song or two.
Okay, okay. I want to go back to one I found real interesting was Welcome to the Orchestra. Did that stem from your when you were young and your dad took you to the orchestra? Is
Yes,
that
well,
yeah,
that's where I got my
right,
knowledge of orchestra. Uh,
right.
Not only, but I mean, I've always been interested and learned as I grew older and became more knowledgeable about music in all facets. The symphony orchestra is very familiar to me, the makeup of the whole orchestra. And once I was afforded the opportunity to perform my children's concert with orchestras, I had an arranger, Scott Irvin, and a few others who did amazing arrangements for me, all the instruments. I wrote that song specifically to introduce the audience, the young audience, to
Yeah.
the families of the orchestra. So, and it worked very, very, very well, and it was fun to do. And I kind of miss those experiences that are no longer happening these days.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
I
you're
did
still
a
you're
total of about 7 or 8 symphony shows all across Canada.
well, you're still staying busy. I mean, and your artwork, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. When did you start? How long ago did you start really focusing on doing your own paintings and that kind of
Okay, I've never given up since art school.
okay.
Since high school.
Yeah.
Art has always been there anyway in the background.
Okay.
And after the short period of time, those 2 years that I spent in art college, Linz, and then Vienna Academy of Arts, it opened up my eyes to a lot of things. But I've always continued to educate myself in the visual arts along with that. And those travels that were afforded me in Europe, in all those different pockets of uh, Spain, Italy, Sicily, North Africa, Morocco, South Africa, Germany, Switzerland, and so on and so forth. I studied all the artists and art history. The Impressionists, I was allowed to when before I even started with Jack's Angels, or no, it was during that time already. I spent a couple of weeks in Paris.
Okay.
I just walked through all the museums and looked at the Monets, the Renoir, all the Impressionists. And then I became familiar with the German Expressionists and the Dadaists, et cetera, the Surrealists. I was always huge on Picasso. So I would always feed my visual imagination with art one way or another, and produced works. Finally, at one point, I guess the first showing I ever had was in Austria in 1977 on one of my return visits there for a short concert tour that where my producer friend Chad Urshik actually also accompanied me playing bass. I did an art show there a couple of times anyway. So, and then gradually got the courage up when I felt I had enough volume to show that I would approach galleries, and over the course of the years have shown in various places.
Yeah, yeah. That was my question. Where have you exhibited your art? But
So
you, yeah, you. I mean, much of your work is very, what I would say, very realism. You know,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I will almost have to look really closely to say this is not a photograph. You know, it's one of those kind. Some others can be a little more abstract, but a lot of yours, yeah, are very realist.
Well,
And
phases one goes through.
yeah, yeah,
After, I guess in the 80s, 90s, Expressionism was it for me. I just
yeah,
had to splash that color onto the canvas, the paper, or whatever, and just tried a whole bunch of things. But then I wanted to also include some figurative or recognizable objects. And I just always followed my instinct and where I felt I needed to go. And it finally, not finally, but again, resurfaced this keen interest in realism
yeah, yeah,
and urban realism. That whole concept of urban realism, um, those amazing American artists.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
artists like that,
yeah,
it will come to me.
yeah,
But um, just appealed to me. And
yeah,
so I started doing a lot of architectural street scenes,
yeah,
snapshot type scenes, just taken out of the car in passing,
yeah,
anything, shop windows, whatever, anything I could use as a composition and then create on the page, often slanted, just the way the picture was taken.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but lately, in the last, well, couple of years, more and more, I'm back to uh, realism, figurative work, landscapes. I just worked on a landscape, or am finishing a new, very large landscape right now. Just a river scene and things like that. Again, my connections back to nature and the outdoors.
yeah.
but I'm also keenly interested in figurative stuff. So my family becomes uh, models. We have 5 grandkids. I'm depicting them in various situations with their pets and cats and dogs and stuff as well. More for exercise for myself than, but once in a while, people will spot something and want to buy it. I do have online art websites. I'm with a few, and my own website. I'm now in the process of uh, trying to convert it into an actual shop.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
Now that I've got more volume in up in the studio and around the house, that I think it needs to move a little more.
right, right. Yeah, you don't want to have all that overhead, as they say. Right, right, right. But I like your color schemes too. I have to say that.
Thank you.
I do like the very vibrant too. I like
Thank
that. I do appreciate this very much.
you. And so,
And Jack, it's been enjoyable. And I
likewise,
I
likewise.
I'm always open to hear you guys the musicians' stories, and there's always intriguing moments, and there's always things that I learn every time, no matter how many of these I do. I learn so much. So, and just like to share it with everybody else and the viewers, and we'll see what kind of comments. It's always fun to you'll find these people coming out of the woodwork. You didn't know. Remember, I saw you at that concert, in Austria. Yeah,
Yes.
things like that. That you never imagined. But all right. Well, I've enjoyed it again. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. My
And,
pleasure.
and for sharing so much and going back in that time machine with me.
Yes.
And
May I share one more current little,
sure, yes, please
little
do. Please
theme?
do.
My
Please do.
connection to being back in Toronto, living back here, and visiting back to Europe just occasionally, my connection to there hasn't completely severed. I've been offered recently in the last year and a half to be a singer on a recording project that's being produced in Austria based on songs that are topical and from the 60s and 70s specifically. So
Oh,
now I'm just the interpreter. I'm a singer, nothing to do with my material at all. But we're singing songs like, um, well, "Blowing in the Wind," for example, and all of the important songs with messages that kind of relate to what is happening in the world today.
New Day, right.
So this
Right.
project is focusing on the connection of what it was like in those days in the 60s
Yeah.
to now. And
Yeah.
that kind of is the relevance of bringing this new project out. It's going to be a double CD. A friend of mine who happens to be my ex-manager from the Jack's Angels, it's his brainchild, his baby that he wanted to produce. So he's got all these professional producers and musicians creating all these amazing tracks, and they send them over to me. I record my vocals on top of them here, send it back, and then they mix and produce it. And I think it's going to be ready in a month or two, maybe.
Oh,
It's
wow.
just something I've been working on, and it kind of, to me, and the only reason I brought it up, it feels like a full circle again.
Full circle. Yeah.
You know,
Yes. Right. Right.
I
Exactly.
started with those
Exactly.
songs that inspired me initially. Here I
Right.
am singing them on someone else's project.
Right. Exactly. And those songs, the really, important ones are so timeless anyway, like you said. They could have been written back then, decades ago, but they're so timeless today. So it's good that you're doing that, and good that he had that
Yeah,
conception, that idea to do that too. So yeah, it needs to reach a younger audience. You're right. You're right. It really does. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's good. That's good. All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to that too. And
Hey,
go ahead and plug your website and stuff for the viewers so they can check out. Keep updated.
there it is. Yeah, Jack Grunsky, at, sorry, wait. Jack Grunsky, I was going to give you the email address.
Okay.
Grunsky.net.
Okay. Jack Grunsky. Okay.
Jack Grunsky altogether.
Okay. All one.
.net.
.net. Okay. So any of you,
Shows the whole picture.
right? Any viewers that want to keep up to date with Jack, what's going on?
I have an older one, jackgrunsky.com, which is also still up, but it's more focused on what I used to do, mostly music.
Okay.
The new website has the music, but also the art. So it combines what I'm doing all together.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. All right. All right. Jack, again, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And I will send you this link, like I said, in about a week or a day or two, maybe. And then we can see what kind of mileage we can get.
All right.
All right. Well, you have a good what's left of it of the weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, looking forward to it.
And you have a good week ahead. All right.
You too. Thank you so much.
All right, Jack.